Okay. So, hello everyone. Welcome to our rebrand of the Global Tech Sprint Leadership Program GTLP. Let me first introduce myself. I'm Amel Khiri, a full stack developer here in Jubix and also a member of the sales and marketing team. Before starting our workshop, I would like to give you some informations about our product, the Global Tech Sprint Leadership Recruitment Agency, GTLRA. Well, in our agency, participants are referred to as sprinters and get awarded with a leadership award based on contribution and commitment. So the GTLRA leads with transparency and shared learning to provide the world with a diversified recruitment agency that advocates inclusive change across all markets to shared financial equity across platforms. Our mission is to provide this service for internationally, both within and outside schools and universities, to drive innovation, share knowledge, and facilitate cross-border leadership, thus paving the way for a brighter, more interconnected future. So, welcome again. I will now hand over to our great speaker to present himself.
Okay. Thank
Edmond?
you very much for the nice introduction, Amel. Hello everyone. I am Edmond Debra, a full stack developer based in Ghana, and I am currently the backend team lead here at Jubix. So, today I am pleased to be presenting to you a workshop which was developed particularly in mind for front-end developers who want to upskill their arsenal of technical skills and also add backend development to their skills so that they'll be able to work on a wider variety of projects. So the name of the workshop is titled Backend Development for Front-End Devs. And today let us look at our learning objectives. First of the objectives is that we are going to have an overview of backend development. So even if you've never heard of backend development before, by the time that you are done with this, you will have a fair idea of what backend development is, and you would even be able to explain it to others. And the second objective is introduction to server-side programming. So with this introduction to server-side programming, we are going to take a deeper dive into backend development and the programming languages that we use and the various factors that you should weigh in when choosing a server-side programming language for your backend projects. Also, third, we are going to build a RESTful API and learn about building RESTful API. This section is going to be hands-on combined with the theoretical aspect. So we are going to learn the theoretical aspect of it, but also implement a RESTful API. And then fourth, work with we are going to learn how to work with databases. So we will learn about the various types of databases and the importance of how the right choice of the database can either make or break your application. So all of these points here are very exciting points, and I can't wait for us to go deeper into the topic of backend development. Okay, so starting with the first one, which is the overview of backend development. So when you are asked what is backend development, the answer is that backend development refers to the server side of web development. So it focuses on the building and maintaining of behind the scenes. So things that happen behind the scenes of your favorite mobile app, your favorite web application. That is what we call backend development. So it involves writing code that will run on the server and it's responsible for handling requests, processing data, and managing the business logic of an application. Now, if what I said is a little bit complicated. What we can learn from this is that when it comes to the internet, there is a very dominant architecture that we use called the client server model. So this client server model is an architecture that we use when creating networked applications. So it defines the relationship and interaction between two types of entities, which is the client and the server. So that is basically what the internet itself is built upon, um, the communication between clients and servers. So when it comes to the applications of this client server model, it has so many vast applications. It is used in web applications, databases, and many other distributed systems. So in the context of backend development, this shows that while there is the client side, which usually can be another computer, another server, it could be a mobile application, for example, Netflix. So when you have Netflix, for example, you can use Netflix on your web browser, you can use Netflix on your iPhone, you can use Netflix on your Windows device. So all of these are client sites of the Netflix application. And then there is a backend part, the server side of the Netflix application, which the front end will send requests to the backend, and then the backend will also send the appropriate responses. So to illustrate, let us look at this diagram. So this represents the client, which can be a front end application, and it will send requests to the server. So the client side is mainly used for user interactions because that is user friendly. So that is what the user sees. For example, when you open a web page, what you are seeing is the client side. That is where the clients, the users are able to interact with. And then the business logic of the application is handled on the server side. In most cases, not every case, but in most cases, business logic and data processing is handled at the server side. So, for example, your favorite website, you will click a button. Let's say you are signing up, and when you hit the sign up button, what actually happens is that you just see that there has been a new web page shown on your screen. What happens behind the scenes is that this machine will send a request to the server side of your favorite websites, and then it will send the appropriate response. And then the client will also update the current web page to show you the appropriate response. So this is the main thing which will help us to distinguish between front end and client side development and back end development, which happens on the server. Okay, so now we've come to see an overview of front end development. I hope everything that I've discussed so far is clear. So please, if you have any questions so far, feel free to leave it in the comments and I'll be sure to answer you. So while waiting for questions, we'll also be moving on to the second point, which is an introduction to server-side programming. So on the front end, the main programming language that we use is JavaScript. So JavaScript is the language of the browser. That is the main thing that we use. But when you come to the backend, for the front end, whilst we mainly use JavaScript, there are alternative technologies like WebAssembly, but the most dominant one is JavaScript. That's what you use for building applications. So we have front end frameworks like React, where you can use to build your applications. But when it comes to the back end, you are really spot for choice. There are so many, there's a plethora of languages that you can choose from. So some of the languages that I've listed here are some of the most popular ones. So yes, here JavaScript too can be used for creating server-side applications, and that is what we actually use here at Jubix. So we use Nest.js to build a very scalable backend, which is which is resistant to bugs. But we don't use raw JavaScript, use TypeScript, which is a type safe version of JavaScript. So we use that in conjunction with Nest.js to build our robust and scalable backend. And then I'm sure everyone has heard of Python before. So Python too can be used to create server-side applications. So the most popular frameworks that we use with Python are Django, Flask, and Fast API. And then we have my personal favorite language, Go, which was developed by Google. And Go can be used also with server-side programming. In fact, server-side programming was one of the main reasons why Go was developed to address such issues. So you can use the standard library of Go to create web applications, and then there are also popular frameworks like Gin and Fiber, which all have their own strengths. So because I have experience in Go, for example, Fiber is very similar to Express. So anyone who has experience with Express.js and wants to learn how to build applications with Golang can use Fiber, and the person will feel right at home. Okay, now moving on to one powerhouse is C Sharp in conjunction with .NET. So this is used a lot in enterprise grade applications like banking systems and very large scale commercial systems. C Sharp is used predominantly in that area. And then we also have Java, which was originally developed by Sun Microsystems and later bought by Oracle. So Java 2 is even more popular than C Sharp, and it is also being used in enterprise applications. But Java's use case is not limited to only backend development. It was originally also used in Android applications before being replaced mainly by Kotlin. And then we have, which I'm sure will be a fan favorite, Ruby, where anyone who attended Microverse should have experience with Ruby on Rails. So if you want to also build backend applications with Ruby, that is also a fantastic language and a fantastic framework, which will get you up to speed very quickly because it is optimized for building applications very quickly. So, what will influence your choice on choosing a programming language for your backend will be dependent on several factors. Here in the slide, I've listed just a few. The first one being interest. If you are interested in the language, it's your own personal project. Of course, go ahead, build a fantastic project in it, and you'll surely be able to help many people with that. So, all of the languages we discussed can be used to create any project of your choice, really. But what if you are looking for more commercial pursuits? Let's say you are building a business, then you need to consider some factors like availability of developers. So let's say you choose a very niche language like Alexa for your backend. You would have a harder time finding qualified developers at the price range that you want because um, it will be hard for you to find the developers to maintain the project long term, even if you're able to build it initially. Whilst a more popular solution like Node.js would be great because there are so many experienced and seasoned Node.js developers who will be available to build your application for you end to end and also to maintain it moving forward. Now, the last point that I've mentioned here is performance. So if you are creating a system, a backend system too, you also need to consider the performance requirements of it. So if you are building a system like, let's say, a stock trading system, then you would need a very low latency and a very fast language which will be able to perform all your backend services in a quick manner. So for that, you look at something like C++, Rust, or Golang. So those are compiled languages. So these compiled languages are able to run very quickly because they are compiled to native code. So that's it runs on your bare CPU. And if performance is important, but maybe somewhere in the middle, not too extreme like something like C++, you can look at a virtual machine based language like C sharp or Java. All these languages that have mentioned, C sharp and Java, they run on a virtual machine. So these languages are somewhere in the middle when it comes to performance of server-side development. And then last but not the least, and these two serve a very important place, you can look at languages like Python and JavaScript. Now, I'm not saying that these languages are not performant. You can get very good performance out of them. But when you need super, super high performance, they may not be the best choice because one, they are interpreted languages, so they don't run natively on the machine. And two, JavaScript, for example, is a single threaded language. So it's not able to run concurrent tasks at a time. It's just able to intelligently manage a single thread and manage several tasks on that thread. So if you want speed of development, stuff like that, then something like JavaScript will be well suited for your use case. So that is for the introduction to server-side programming. So if you are looking this, you can feel free to put your favorite programming language in the chat. As I said, mine is Go, even though I'm working with JavaScript here at Jubix. So, um, right now we are taking a little detour from the programming side and looking at the actual architecture of backend systems. What I'm showing you right now is the simple architecture of a web-based application. So, when starting from the left, you see that you have your users, and your users will be using maybe a mobile app, maybe a desktop application, maybe a website, and through the internet they will send requests to your API. Now if you are not familiar with APIs, you realize that ever since I've started this whole workshop, I haven't talked about APIs. So the main thing that the API does is that in the context of a backend development perspective is that it establishes how the front end and the back end is going to communicate. So without the API, there won't be a structured way of communication. But when you have your API, then you're able to define how, let's say, if a user likes a post, what will happen? If a user follows someone, let's say for a social media app, what will happen? You will define API routes for that. And we see that in this diagram, the API is separate from the server, but in reality, the API runs on the server. And then the server also will have business logic included and many other things. So this is a very simple one, but more complex systems will have so many other parts like caching, content delivery networks, load balancers, and so have you. And then finally, you have the database. So, as you would guess from the name, even if you know nothing about databases, the database stores data and it is in charge of storing and retrieving data. So, if let's say a user signs into a platform and they are going to look at who has friended me, who has unfriended me. That data will be stored in the database. So once they log into their platform, a request will be sent to the server. Then the server will fetch that data from the database, and eventually it will be returned to the client side, which is the front end. So if your application does not need persistent storage, or you don't need to store the data for a long amount of time, a database is not required. But if you know that your application needs to store data for a persistent amount of time, then you would need a database in your backend architecture. So this was also a brief introduction of a simple backend architecture of a web application. Now, going one step deeper into backend architectures, as you can see on the screen, I have this image where on the left side we have monolith and on the right side we have microservices. So when we say a monolithic application or a monolith is simply an application where all the functionalities for your backend is made into one big application. So all everything you need, for example, authentication of users, storage of data, notification services, payment services, all of these different functionalities will be grouped together into one application for your backend, and that is the monolith. So the monolith has its own the monolith has its own pros. Some of the pros are monoliths tend to be very stable, and scaling a monolith is a more simple task. So, for example, if your backend is receiving many requests and your current server cannot handle all of the requests, you can just spin up one additional instance of your application, and that will be able to serve more requests to the front end. So that is one of the biggest pros of monolith applications. Now let us go to microservices. When we talk about microservices, it is the situation where you will have take of it like division of labor or separation of concerns. So you will split your app into smaller apps. That's why we use the word micro here. So into smaller applications where they are all linked together and each application serves one specific purpose. So when creating our microservices, one microservice should not be doing the work of three. It should be split such that one microservice, for example, will be taking care of authentication, one microservice will be taking care of data, one microservice will be taking care of payments, like that. So the advantages of microservices is that they are independently scalable. So this scalability will mean that once we have different services which are interconnected, and one particular service needs to spin a server, unlike the monolith application where you would need to spin a whole large application, you would just need to spin more servers for just one small instance of your microservice. So that is one of the advantages. Another advantage of microservices is that you are able to independently develop those microservices. So you wouldn't need to wait to release a new version of all the other existing services. For example, if you have a payment service and there's some changes that you need to make, you can just make the needed changes to your payment service, updates, and then through your DevOps pipeline, push those new changes without having to rely on the others. And for a fun fact, that is the architecture that we employ here at Jubix. So we follow a microservice based architecture. Okay, so are there still not any comments yet or any questions? Else we would be moving on to the third part of our workshop, which is building RESTful APIs. So if you would remember in one of the previous slides, I made mention of APIs. So here we are going to learn about RESTful APIs in particular. So let's just first look at the definition of an API. I did mention briefly about what it was, but let us go deeper into what an API is. So an API stands for an application programming interface, and it allows different software components to communicate with each other. So I guess most of us here are developers, so we already know what an API is. For example, I'm sure when learning web development, most of us developed something like a weather app, where you will have your application send a request to the open weather API, and then you will fetch your data. All examples of APIs. Now, in the context of backend development, APIs are used to define how the front end, which is the client side, and the back end, which is the server side, will communicate. And there are many types of APIs. One of the most popular and the one we also use at Jubix here is RESTful APIs. But that is not the only type of API we have. We have SOAP, we have GraphQL, and many other communication protocols. Now that you know what an API is, let us dive deeper into RESTful APIs. So first, let us look at what REST means. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but rest here is not the normal rest that you know about, sleeping or something. No, it has nothing to do with that. Rest means representational state transfer. And this may be a mouthful, but what it really is that it is a set of guidelines for how applications, which is mostly clients, can interact with service, which will hold resources over the internet. So it is just a set of guidelines. So when we say that you have a REST AI, sorry, a REST API or a RESTful API, it is simply an API which follows the guidelines of representational state transfer, which is REST. Okay, now let us have a brief look at some of the principles of REST. Starting with uniform interface. What this principle simply means is that when accessing resources, so when the front end wants to access a resource from the back end, and in most cases, you have different interactions that you need to make with your backend, it should be uniform. So when you look across board, for example, deleting a resource, creating a resource, posting a resource, or reading a resource, also updating a resource, it should all follow a uniform way of doing things. The second one, which I'm going to talk about, is stateless. So a REST API should be stateless. Now, what do we mean by stateless? If you've developed with React, you already know what state is. So it is similar to this case that when sending a request, when your front end is sending a request to your backend, it should include all the data that your backend will need to fulfill your request and send you an appropriate request. So you should not rely on your server saving some sort of states to help you to fulfill a request. Your request that you send should be totally encompassing, holding all the data that your backend would need. So if you realize that your API is relying too much on state, then that means that you are following an anti-pattern and you would probably need to go back to the drawing board and reassess your decisions with your API. And the third one is layered system. So if you took note of one of the earlier diagrams that was showed, we realized that the front end will send a request to the API, and then the API would um, send the request to the database. So we see that the front end cannot directly talk with the database. They are all the only parts where they can talk in are the layers immediately next to them. So that is what you mean by layered system. So a REST API should follow a layered system. And also a REST API should be cacheable. So when we say it should be cacheable, this means that if the front end sends a request, the response that the backend will serve should be able to be cached using there are so many caching solutions, whichever one will be ideal for your application, so that it will increase performance of your application. So that next time when the front end sends the same response, when the front end sends the same request, there will be no need to look up the database, for example, or to do any new computations. The response has already been cached, and then that cached response can be sent back to the front end. And then the last one, it is code on demand. So code on demand is more of an optional principle when compared to the rest. And it simply means that your REST API should be able to send some code to the front end that the front end will execute. So if your app has a particular need for some code which can be sent to the front end to be executed, you can also follow this principle, which is Code on demand. Okay, now we are going deeper into the implementation of APIs. So APIs, as we've said, that they use representational state transfer, and in REST APIs we use something called HTTP verbs. I'm sure most of you are already familiar with HTTP verbs, but I just want to bring this up. So for a simple API, for example, which is users, there can be a get request to slash users, and then that will send the number of users in the database. Of course, if it is a large number, there will be pagination, so we can send maybe 100 users at a time, or maybe 200 users, so to prevent a very long request time. So that is the meaning of get. Get is just meant to get data from a backend resource. And then post is used to create a new resource on the backend. So as you can see in the description here, we will use post to create a user. So when we go to slash users, we would use the post method and visit slash users to create a new user. And then we have get. So get will be used to, of course, get the data. But in this case, realize that we have uh, URL parameter ID. So this will mean that you use it to retrieve one particular user. And then for updating the user, we have two verbs, which is put and patch. So you can use any of them. So the thing is, behind the scenes, put will replace the existing resource, and patch will just modify the resource, but they can both be used, and you can use that to modify a particular resource. For example, updating a user. And then our last HTTP verb that you are going to look at is delete. So we can use delete to, of course, delete a resource, but it's usually not recommended to use delete for a whole set of resources, but just for one. So the front end will be able to, for example, delete one user at a time, but not a whole set of users. Okay, now we have considered so much about implementing REST APIs. So we are going to get our hands dirty and build for ourselves our very own API. Okay, so for this API, we are going to use Express. And I had already developed this, but don't worry, we will just comment out everything and start from scratch. So with this API that we are building, we are going to be building it using Express.js. In Jubix, we use Nest.js, but I wanted to use Express.js so that everyone would have a feeling of how things are really done under the hood, since Nest.js employs either Express.js or Fastify in the background. Okay, so the API we are going to create is going to be an API for managing users. That is what our API is going to do. So for that, if you don't have Express installed, you are going to need to install it. So you are going to just do, of course, I've already initialized the package. So you are going to do npm init to initialize your package, and also npm install express to initialize the express in your application. One more dependency that you will need is called nodemon. So what nodemon does is that you would first, if you didn't have nodemon, anytime you make any changes to your server, you have to refresh your browser session that you are using to test your API in order to see the changes. But with nodemon, the changes will reflect immediately. Okay, So the features that we want in our application is to be able to, one, create a user. So create a new user, get a user by ID, update a user by ID, get all users. So this is usually not recommended in a real backend system, but the data set that you are going to use is going to be very small. So getting all the users at a time is not going to be a performance constraint, but in a real backend application, getting all the users in one request is not a good idea. So you have to use something called pagination to break down the data into pages, more or less. And we are going to be able to delete a user also by ID. So the first thing that I'm going to do is import express from express, and then I'm going to create a new application. So const app equals express, and our application is going to listen on port 3000, on port 3000, and we will have something like an anonymous function which will simply console.log listening on ports 3000. So of course in a normal application you would store this in an environment variable. So in when you check my package.json, I had already included a script for this. Of course, initially we can just run node server.js to okay. So we've had our first um we've had our first error. We're off to a good start, aren't we? Okay. So it seems there's a problem with me using ES modules. So I'm just going to use what I'm comfortable with, which is const express equals require express. And this should run. Okay. So it's probably small here, but you can see that our app is listening on port 3000. So we are off to a good start. So now we are going to go into the deep implementation of things. So what we are some dummy users. Because of time, we would have created a new database connection, but time is not on our side, so you just have to make do with this. So we are going to have name John, email John at example.com, and we are going to have one which is myself, Edmond, and then my email would be Edmond at jubix.com. dot co. Okay, so we have two users. Now, okay, let me add an ID element here for getting the IDs. So an ID, this will have an ID of 0, and this will have an ID of 1. Okay, great, great. This will have an ID of 1. So now we have our dummy data. So we are going to do this. Now that we've seen that our application is actually running, we are just going to do a simple test. So we are going to do app.get, which of course we've talked about the various functions, the HTTP verbs, which include get for getting a resource, post for creating a new resource, and others. So this is going to be get, so that when we send a get request to our API, which is running on localhost 3000, we should get a response. So we are going to say res.send hello world. Okay, so let us check that. I'm using Tender Client, but you can use any um, tool for testing your application. So you can use Postman, Insomnia, whichever is convenient for you. You can use that. Okay. So we have another error. So let me see what is going on here. Let me run npm run dev. Okay, okay, and then send the server. Okay, great. So we have a status of 200, which in backend development, a status of 200 hello world function is working properly. Now, time to quickly add some others and then replace it with um, okay. It's of an error. Okay, so we are supposed to use res.send status instead of res.send. All right, this is all part of development. So let's just um, make the needed changes and run again. Okay, we have another. Okay. So I've created some users here which will not be needed. So let me send again. Uh, disable all the headers.
Hello again. Sorry, I guess that there's technical issue with our with Edmund. Okay, so let's wait a little bit. Maybe he'll join us again. Meanwhile, you can ask questions about the presentation, and you can answer the questions that we have already in the comments. Are you front end or back end developer? You can share with us what's your favorite database or what do you use for the back end. We're really curious to know about this. And don't forget that for every workshop that you attend with Jubix, you will have points. You will be rewarded by micro points. And it's a surprise. Will let you know more about that in our upcoming events. Okay. I don't know if our amazing Busua is here, our sales and marketing team lead.
Yes, yes, I'm here. Lovely to see
Hi,
everyone. That was an
Busua.
amazing presentation, Amel. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah. I learned a lot.
Yes, I did as well. Did you know how
Mm,
important databases and APIs were? We wouldn't do a lot of things without them.
exactly. Yeah. But
Yes.
still, as a
So,
micronote, I still have affection for Ruby on Rails. I don't know why. What about you? I guess it's the same
yes,
for
of
most
course.
of
I love React. I'm a
micronotes.
React baby.
Mhm. Okay.
Yes.
I don't know if
So the other
Edmund can
exciting
join
piece of
us.
information we wanted to share, Amel,
Yeah.
is concerning the applications that are launching next year for Jubix. So those that have been asking and inquiring when we're officially launching next year in January. So you'll be able to apply and submit your applications from January to February, and then from February to March we'll be having a screening, and then from March to April we'll be having the interviews. So you should look out for that information as well.
Yeah. And I was telling them about the points that they will get if they attend. Yeah. Maybe you can tell them
Yes, yes,
further.
yes. I hope that you're piling up those Juby points. They should be more than 15 by now, hopefully. So let's get sharing and let's get promoting our workshops weekly. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if we can, if we're going to wait for Edmond since he was blocked, or we will welcome our special panelist and speaker. I don't know.
Okay. I think we can wait for maybe just a minute or so as we look out for questions in the chats. And if Edmund isn't able to come back, we can introduce our panelist speaker. So are there any questions, comments?
Mhm. So, Plamen Petkov is asking, can you again show the comments for setting up the project? I hope that Edmond will be here soon again to continue and ask the questions. Sorry, and answer the questions.
Yes, of course. Okay, I think we can go ahead. Perhaps Edmund is having technical challenges. You should be able to join us, hopefully. I think we can go on and introduce our panelist speaker for today. Her name
Mhm.
is Pooja, and she works for TikTok. I think she can go ahead and introduce herself and share more.
Hello, all. First of all, thank you, Susan, for inviting me. And thank you, Amal, for introducing this platform to me. And the whole the workshop was going pretty good. I was following Edmund. He was doing so well about explaining everything from details from the scratch and everything. So about me, Currently, I'm working as a software engineer in TikTok in San Jose, California. Previous to this, I worked for a captioning company, which where I worked as a speech scientist, and my work was majorly backend and machine learning. After joining TikTok, I joined as a full stack developer. For last few months, I am few months, it's like 7 8 months actually, near about a year. I am working as a front end engineer. So that's why when this topic came up, like front back end development for front end developers, it was like pretty interesting because uh, people generally have an idea like front end engineers. It's tough for front end engineers to learn back end. And then when I go through the topic, I see you guys talk about Node.js. So Node.js and like it's on a JavaScript platform, right? A framework, like same thing. You don't have to learn extra languages to do coding in Node.js. So uh, like any front end developer who wants to be a back end engineer, like they can already start, they know the language, they just can start using that language to develop. Yeah, like the major components which Edmund was going through, like what is client, what is server, and how a front end can call a back end call a back end, like using the APIs. So all these few basic things it's a front end engineer should be knowing. But as a front end engineer, currently, as when I am working as a front end engineer, like we get APIs from the back end to make the calls, right? From to get, to post, to put or delete. When you are deleting a button, you delete the button, either you are calling an API sending to backend saying delete this particular record. So what backend does, backend will if it's just as a database, backend will take that update and they will have a SQL query on their system, which will they make the call and update the database. So they will delete from the database, for example. And for example, you want to get some information, you want to list all like let's take an example of Instagram, where you pull all the images, the videos, and so how you do it, it's a get API, so you get it from the backend. If in the during the session, Edmund mentioned about cache. So in there, what it is like, sometime, for example, there are few of the recent events are generally saved in I'm talking in respect of Instagram, recent event are saved in the cache. So when there is like you are doing a get call, all those are called from the cache instead of making a database call. So like the whole process, you just when you do development from front end, as a front end engineer, just try to think when what is happening when you're creating an UI, and then we get all the values, and then from how we are getting it, what might be going on in behind the scenes. So when you are getting that values from the backend, what backend might be doing, but there are like bigger process there, like the backend works with like multiple different things, like so they have their database, they have their code base from where they'll be calling different things, they have cache, they have load balancers, and again there are different other multiple process that goes in it, like for example, I would say if like a image you are saving in a backend side, the kind of database will be different, it will not be a SQL database. But if you are saving like normal, like table details, that will be saved in a SQL database. Also like videos, image will be saved in blob in a file system. So there are different ways of doing it, like which happens in backend. But if we go straight forward for now, from the front end, as simple as the image which Edmund showcased in the front and the starting of his presentation, that client, then there is a server, and how the communication is happening using APIs. uh, so actually I didn't present make any presentation, but any questions anyone have, so I can go more details on those, so that like, or any particular topic anyone wants to talk about, know about. Otherwise, like I can go on this front end and back end thing like for some time, forever. But it's someone, if I someone have questions, I can it will be means I can answer them. uh Emil, do you know any if anyone have a question?
Yeah, sorry. So I don't know. Comments are a little bit delayed on LinkedIn.
Okay,
Since now we have just one question for Edmund, which was
okay, that's yeah.
yeah, about the comments, because someone didn't really get the comments for setting up the project.
Okay.
You can show the comments for getting setting up project. I have a silly question for you.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite framework for the front end, and do you have any tools for back end that really you can't live without?
So I work like in TypeScript, React, like
Mhm.
front end is TypeScript, React currently, yeah, and backend. Uh, Backend, I worked in multiple languages. Currently, I'm not working in backend, but previously I worked with Django, like for Python. I use that. I for
Mhm.
Java, I Spring Boot I used. I am more comfortable with Java because I worked on Java a lot, but people will never agree. Even I don't agree like working in Java because like it's a pretty like heavy language compared to
Yeah,
Python and Go. It is like smooth, simple. But I have more experiences in Java, so that makes me more comfortable doing that. It's just a
great.
personal preference, as Edmund mentioned, right? Personal preferences, and but yes, companies. He also mentioned the topic called performance, and
Mm.
number of people. Java developers, there are a lot of developers, but performance wise, majorly companies go for Python or Go or Node.js, and at least TikTok
Yeah.
does that. These three languages for backend
Okay.
development.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know. So, how do you think that how can equipping front-end developers with back-end knowledge enhance their skill set and career prospects in the future of work? Do you think that it's really important, or no, front-end alone and
Okay.
back-end developer? Yeah.
So I think full stack developers have a little bit of upper hand for obvious reasons. They know both the things, but uh, so first of all, like yeah, there is always an upper hand if a full stack developer. They are like smaller companies, middle range, and all big companies. They will you have more options. You'll not be sticking towards only front end roles or only back ends. You can always apply for the generic software roles, but sometime it might happen after joining the company. You might have to move in one direction, but there are always generic roles which you have more options. And for front end engineers to learn back end, like as I was mentioning, it's very simple. When you are using an UI, just try to think why, what might be going behind this delete button, might be going behind this. Oh, this password validation is happening. If it's not a front end validation, it's happening validations in the back end, how it might be happening. So it's like from there, you have the basic questions. So then like try to search or go through like as he was mentioning about the APIs, how the backend might be looking like. Let's start with a simple backend like a server and a database, but to for saving, but saving the data. For simple saving a person name, date of birth and location, you just need a
Mhm.
SQL database. That's a simple. What
Yeah.
happens if you have like work like for Instagram, then you have videos, you have comments, and you can't delete, like you can't see like say like after 1 year I delete all the data. You have to save the data with you have to keep in business in mind, like we need to
Yes.
save this
Yes.
data for next 50 years, 60 years, I don't know, like for a particular person. Then many things will come in scenario in those situations when you are building scaling the business, growing it more big. So for starters, I think as a front end engineer, just go with a simple straight line, like how the calls might be making, and in the back end, what might be happening. Once they're get comfortable with that, create small application, then they should go to the next level of understanding the business. Like say they imagine, they start thinking like for a particular very easy topics like library management. People can work on like book, like self for something created for themselves, like which they might be. I was once mentoring one girl. She used to teach her students a Mandarin. So she created a profile where she can keep the list of all her students. So
Hmm.
like try small POCs like this. So it will be they that way you can learn. Generally, all the big business things more happens once you join a particular organization, because that organization will have their own business requirements. Depending on that, you keep on implementing. But starters, we
Okay.
can start with a particular UI, and there from there you can learn, depending just pick up like as an interest, as a hobby kind of thing.
Okay.
It's more
Okay.
easy
Thank you.
to learn.
Hmm. Great. Okay. So lately, there's a lot of technology trends. What's a recent technology trend that has caught your eye, and how do you think it might impact front end or back end development,
Oh,
especially
I'll
with
talk
this
about
AI?
ChatGPT.
Really?
It's fun because I haven't tried for my work ever, but I tried in general thing for ChatGPT. So I was doing writing a book on software development. So I just told them a chapter name, and they gave me all details that can happen like in that particular chapter, and they gave me three. I think ChatGPT gives three times, and they ask you, "Okay, did I do better than before?" So it was pretty interesting. And I was hearing like people can also, I see a lot of internet, internet also a lot of memes like people asking like you coded my project, asking the chat, if you coded my project, there's a bug, can you fix it now and just fix get it right? Something like. So this is pretty interesting, uh but a personal idea, I think it will never, people are saying like it might replace take people, but I don't think it's gonna happen, because just take in a jobs intake, it's just not writing the code. There are 100 other things that is
Mhm.
involved, and not just writing the code. So that is interesting, but yeah, but I don't think any one of us should be afraid to lose job.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a new skill that we should learn, prompts and how to use AI to improve our
Right,
work, to
right, right.
spend less time
Right.
working, but replacing humans, I don't think
Yeah.
so. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Okay, so let me go to another question, which is not really technical. What qualities and attributes will be essential for effective leadership in teams comprising both front end and back end developers?
So as per me, I feel to be a leader in a situation where there are front end and a back end engineers, the person who will be leading should have a basic idea, at least a knowledge of the both front end and back end. When anyone comes and talk about a situation or a solution, he or she should know what they are expect, the his or her subordinates are expecting, what solution they are suggesting. They need to know that. So they needs to be technically sound in both the situation. At sometime it is okay to know, don't know the coding details, like in the depth of the
Really?
coding part for that, because it's sometimes the leaders, what happens, they don't code. Like people, like individual contributors like us, we are coding like 80 to 90% of the time of our work day, but leaders always don't code. So there will be time like they haven't coded for 3 years, so that time they'll be losing many the like the all syntaxes, there are chances. But they need to be very strong on the subjects. They need to know what happens when a particular call might happen, not like how the call is happened, like what for example, they should have the basic idea of all the APIs, for example. They those basic things they shouldn't be forgetting. So sound on, have a knowledge on both will is very much required. And he or she should have a knowledge on design, that a particular design, uh, what are the pros and cons of that particular design. Those are very important for leading
Yeah.
development team, back and front end both.
Okay, thank you. I guess that Edmond is here. I don't.
Oh,
Okay,
I
great.
had
Yeah,
mine for
finally.
that.
Hello,
Welcome
everyone,
back.
for going off. Okay. Um, I have answered some of the questions that I got in the group, not in the group, in LinkedIn under the comments. So, one of the questions that I got was that the command for setting up the project I used it's in the comments so anyone can check. So it's npm init -y to set up a new node project. And then for installing Express, which is the framework that I use to make the API, it is just npm I Express. So that means you are installing Express. But truly, the a Google, just one Google search will give you so much like information that you would need to even create like something even complex. So you can just Google how to create a REST API in Express.js, and you will have so many resources, even the ones which will guide you in connecting it with the database. So there are so many resources for anyone who is interested in learning.
Amazing. So, Pooja was talking about, the technology trend that we are all everybody's talking about, ChatGPT and AI. You mentioned that just using Googling the thing. Do you use ChatGPT, for example, for tutorials or to help, or you're
Yeah.
not yet using it?
No, I do use ChatGPT a lot, to be honest. So if I encounter a bug, I use ChatGPT to help in debugging and also even learning something new. Um, One thing that I learned that has helped me very much, and I think any developer here too can learn, is that you can write this prompt to ChatGPT. Let's say you've written some code, so you can paste the code in ChatGPT and ask, how would a senior developer write this code? Yeah,
Wow.
and ask that question, and ChatGPT will give you like many insights on things that can be done better and stuff. So you can use it to create your own tutorials. If you want to learn Python, you can just say ChatGPT help me to learn Python. Like the use cases are endless, really.
Yeah, it's really clever, you know. That's what I
Yeah,
was saying. I mean, ChatGPT is like a new skill that we have to learn. If you don't put the right prompt, you will not have the expected answer. I
yes.
don't know if you have any questions for our guest, Pooja, or
Okay.
Yes, I have a question for Pooja. Sorry.
yeah.
Why do you think more developers prefer front end than back end? And then also, where do you think AI will shape software development in the next maybe 3 to 5 years?
Okay, so for first question, I'm not sure, like, but some feels maybe that front end is more easier than back end. But I personally feel front end is tough than back end. Oh my god, those CSS minute details. Oh my goodness, oh, but that's so tough. I feel I get more bugs because of my UX compared to my logics. Because I'm like, but I think they feel from talking from the like with different people think like front end is easier compared to back end. So major tasks like saving everything is all those heavy tasks are done in back end. So that's why I think front end people think. And regarding like as ChatGPT mentioned, and with the new Gemini, I think they said like Google came up with a new one. So with all this, it will improve it. I think software engineers should use as like a reference, as Edmund also mentioned. Of course, we have Google, our Stack Overflows. We have that. We should use as those tools as improvement for our work. That is very important. And I don't think it's going to replace, because software development is not about only coding. There are multiple things, multiple decisions goes into it. So we can use AI, all the learning things to make better decisions maybe, instead of like letting whatever, because for example, but at a particular situation, the solution given by the AI may be a very good solution, but for different business it will not fit. It will be changing depending on the business. And when like for example, Edmund here is a software engineer. He is working on like doing the uh, webinars, working for your company. Your business logic, your idea is different from different another uh, company, so like it will change. So I think and also inside business also there are multiple things, multiple layers, right? So one must be developing for something in the same business, something for someone else is developing for something else. So as per me, it will you can AI can help, it will be like go parallelly help, but yeah, that's all, but not going to replace or anything, because there are a lot of hard work, extra work goes behind software engineering, not only coding.
Amazing. Edmond, do you have any
Of
question for
course,
our
thank
guest?
you.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I don't have any questions for our audience. I just want to add a little bit to what Pooja said. That yeah, so looking at what we have now, AI can be used heavily as an assistant in your development, other tasks, not even just development, like even these things you can use AI to help you with that. So instead of developers viewing AI as an enemy that is here to take our jobs, we should rather look at how to effectively use it to boost our productivity. Of course, in the future, AI is getting exponentially better. So maybe this year, the code I can write is limited. Maybe next year, I can write way more advanced code, right? But still, one, the domain knowledge that we as developers have, we are going to use that tool to build better software more efficiently. So I'll just admonish that we try to um, be conversant with how we will use these AI tools, not just ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, and all the others, so that we will become better developers overall. Um,
Thank you,
yeah.
Edmond. Sorry. Buswa, any other questions?
No other questions, though someone has reached out to me privately in my inbox. They're
Mm.
asking about the Juby points and the applications. So let me just run through that again once more before we wrap up. So basically, Juby points are points that you earn for attending each one of our weekly sessions. We have 2 workshops weekly on Tuesdays and Thursdays discussing various topics within IT. And then we officially have a webinar on Friday to promote our Jubix products. So every event that you attend will earn you 15 Jubix points. And if you refer friends and colleagues, you earn extra points. And these points will accumulate towards cash prizes prizes just and rewards that will announce officially when we launch Jubix next year. And then concerning the applications, so we mentioned that Jubix is built up of a trio of products, Jumit, the GTLRA, as well as Momo Code Game Over. So any of the platforms or any of the facilities that we have as the products of Jubix, you are able to join the platform. For example, if you are a talent seeking employment, you are able to join the GTLRA platform specifically, which is our recruitment agency, if you're seeking employment. And for those that are companies and cooperatives who want to invest or are seeking talent, that's the time frame of applications that we're referring to for you to join and submit your applications to be considered for our onboarding system. I hope that's clear. So get busy, get sharing, and let's earn as many Jubix points as we can. So I think that's
Great.
a wrap. I think I've explained on that, and I think Emil, you can officially close up for us.
Yeah, okay. I would like to thank Edmond for really the amazing, all the informations about backend. I really learned a lot, honestly. And thank our special guest, our amazing Pooja. And we'll be really, really honored if we can have you for our upcoming events, if you are available, of course. I would like to thank you all for attending this workshop. And the last thing, in one word, Pooja, front end or back end?
I like backend more.
Backend. Edmund, I know your answer, but front end or backend?
Back,
Backend.
yeah.
Usua. Usua.
Definitely front end. We're front end babies.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. So thank you everyone and see you in our upcoming events, workshops or okay. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.